The German pilot saw the tail guns and smiled. That was the mistake. From a distance, the American bomber looked like every other B-17 in the stream, big, stubborn, full of fuel, men, and metal, dragging itself deeper into German sky, where fighters waited for it to slow, separate, and die. The Luftwaffe pilots had done this enough times to know the rhythm. Close from behind, force the tail gunner to panic, make him fire too early, watch the tracers spread wide and useless, then slide in through the wasted burst and kill the bomber at proper range. It was a professional kind of contempt, and on most days it worked. Inside the tail, Staff Sergeant Michael Aroth was alone. That was always the part men on the ground forgot. The tail gunner wasn't just exposed, he was isolated. No wingman, no crewman shoulder to shoulder, just a narrow compartment, twin guns, freezing air, and a long, empty stretch of sky where death usually appeared as a dot and became a fighter before you had time to be afraid in stages. Aruth had learned something about that sky. Fear makes gunners greedy. Greedy gunners fire early. Early fire feels aggressive, but in practice it does the enemy a favor. It shows range. It shows panic. It empties belts into empty air and heats barrels for nothing. By World War II, American gunners were already learning the hard lesson that aerial kills usually came very close, not at movie distance. Long, wild bursts looked heroic. Short, disciplined bursts at brutal range kept bombers alive. Aruth understood that better than most, not because a manual had made him brave, because enough enemy fighters had already come at him to teach the difference between noise and damage. So when the first Bf-109 began settling onto the bomber's tail, he didn't fire. He watched. The German pilot kept coming. That was where the laughter lived, not in sound but in behavior. The fighter didn't jink much, didn't rush, didn't look worried. It approached like a man walking toward a door he had opened a dozen times before. The tail guns were visible. The gunner was visible. And still the Messerschmitt kept closing, because from the German side of the fight, this looked familiar. One more American who would start shooting too far out, too hard, and too badly. Aruth let him come closer. The distance shrank from impossible to dangerous, then from dangerous to insane. The BFF-109 was close enough now that its nose no longer looked like part of the sky. It looked like a machine with a man inside it. Close enough to read attitude, close enough to see confidence. Still Aruth held his fire. That was why other crews called the tactic crazy when they saw it done right. Waiting that long inside a bomber tail was not dramatic courage. It was a deliberate bargain with death. But we's a deliberate bargain with death. Hold too long, and a 20 cannon burst tears through your compartment before you ever touch the trigger. Fire too early, and the fighter kills you properly from outside your effective pattern. The tactic gave you almost no room for error. That was exactly why it worked. At the last moment, the moment when the German pilot believed the American gunner had frozen, or lost his nerve, or simply didn't understand range, Aruth opened up. Not a panic stream, a short, tight burst. Twin .50s hammering straight into a target that had come too close to escape cleanly. The Bf-109 snapped sideways under the hit. Not a glorious explosion, a more violent, useful reaction, a sudden break in line, a hard wing drop, a nose that no longer looked in control. The fighter peeled away trailing damage, and the second German pilot behind him saw something much worse than a comrade hit. He saw a tail gunner who had not wasted a round. That changes the whole attack. Because fighter tactics against bombers depend on expectation. If the gunner behaves like the others, the next pilot makes his run according to pattern. If the gunner behaves differently, later fire, tighter burst, closer kill zone, the approach stops feeling routine. The approach stops feeling routine. Now the attacker has to think, and the second a fighter pilot starts thinking about the gunner instead of the bomber has already improved its odds. Aruth forced that doubt into the sky. The next attacker came in faster and slightly offset, trying to spoil the tail angle and avoid the exact line that had just punished the first German. Better geometry, smarter pilot, but it also meant a shorter firing window once he crossed into Aruth's cone. Again, Aruth waited. Again, the distance collapsed until the attacking fighter looked absurdly near. Then another short burst. This time the rounds walked under the engine and through the fuselage just behind it. The 109 jerked high, lost its line, and sliced away in smoke before it could finish the attack. 2 fighters had come in expecting a frightened tail gunner. 2 had broken away under hits delivered so late that neither had enough sky left to recover the run. That was when the laughter ended. Not because the Germans were weak, because they were good enough to recognize a new problem. A tail gunner willing to wait that long was no longer defending like a man trapped in a bomber. He was hunting from the tail of one, and a Ruth wasn't done. By the time the 3rd fighter shaped up behind the B-17, the rules of the fight had changed. The attackers were no longer executing clean textbook passes. They were testing angles, widening slightly, searching for a safer line in. That gave the bomber stream something precious. Time. Not much. A few seconds here, another correction there. But in air combat, seconds are structure. Seconds keep formation. Seconds keep crews alive. Then the sky turned uglier. Cannon fire struck the bomber. Metal hammered. The interphone died. His oxygen line was broken. One of a Ruth's guns jammed. On July 30th, 1943, during a major mission over Germany, official records say he kept fighting under precisely that kind of punishment. Wounded, oxygen cut off, interphone dead. One gun jammed, yet stayed in the tail, and kept firing until he had destroyed 4 enemy aircraft in that action. Not with a clean bomber run, not with an easy hero shot, with one man in a damaged tail compartment. Half his advantages gone, the enemy now fully alert, and a tactic so risky that everybody who saw it called it suicidal right up until it started working. Because the German pilots were not laughing anymore. Now they were coming back angry, and angry fighters make faster mistakes. The second German pilot did not repeat the first man's mistake. He came in offset, not straight down the tail, not centered. He slid in from high rear quarter, where the bomber's motion would distort the gunner's lead and force a bad burst if the American panicked. It was the smarter attack, less pride, more method. Michael Aruth saw that immediately. The fighter was not trying to scare him into firing early anymore. It was trying to make him miss late. So Aruth changed with it. He did not track the nose, he tracked the path. The difference matters in air combat. Bad gunners chase metal. Good gunners aim at where speed is about to turn into collision. The BFUT-100 and 9 came down fast, crossing the tail from right to left, trying to cut through the gunner's cone before a proper burst could settle. Aroth let the fighter enter deep, too deep from the German pilot's point of view. Then he fired one short burst, not at the cockpit, not at the prop, but under the engine and into the root of the wing, where a crossing target cannot absorb surprise cleanly. The Messerschmitt snapped upward, rolled off line, and vanished under the bomber trailing damage. That was the second kill zone closed. And now the Germans knew it. The tail of that B-17 was no longer a place where a pilot could come in with confidence and leave with a clean firing run. It had become a trap built on patience. Every second a fighter kept coming, expecting the American to break first. It was actually flying deeper into Aruth's terms. The third attack came uglier, a pair this time. One fighter high, one lower, using the classic pressure move. Make the tail gunner commit to one target, then let the second plane finish the bomber while the guns are still correcting. It was exactly the kind of coordinated attack that broke ordinary crews. Aruth refused the bait. He ignored the nearer fighter. That was the whole decision. The lower attacker looked like the immediate danger, which is why the Germans wanted him to feel urgent. But the higher pilot had the cleaner angle to kill the bomber after the guns shifted. So Aruth held his fire, let the lower fighter keep closing untouched, and waited for the upper one to commit. The moment it did, he struck. A hard burst into the leading edge of the attack, rounds driving through the front fuselage and wing root before the German had room to pull clear. The fighter broke violently, spoiling the geometry of the whole two-plane assault. That saved the bomber, not because both Germans died in the same second, but because the attack collapsed before it reached the range where cannon fire could finish the aircraft. The lower pilot had to break away instead of driving home. One decision, one burst, one ruined attack pattern. That was when the fight turned savage. Cannon shells came in. One exploded against the B-17 and sent damage straight into Eruth's compartment. He was hit, his oxygen line was cut, the interphone died. His left gun jammed. Somewhere forward, the pilot had to throw the bomber into violent evasive movement, just to keep the next wave from tearing it apart. Crewmen elsewhere in the aircraft thought the fortress was finished. Some bailed out. Those are all elements recorded in the citation. And inside the tail, with the aircraft braking hard and blood running down his leg, Aruth faced the moment that separated a deadly gunner from a dead one. He had one working gun, one at high altitude, wounded, without oxygen, without a voice to the rest of the crew, inside a compartment the Germans now believed had finally been broken. Most men in that position would have tried to save themselves first. Aruth went back to the gun. That was the tactic in its final form. Not just waiting until the enemy was close, remaining dangerous after the Germans believed no danger was left. The next BFF 109 came in expecting a crippled bomber and a dead or helpless tail gunner. That expectation killed him. Aruth used the one good gun the way he had used two, late, cold, and close. The fighter committed deeper than it should have, and Aruth hammered it just as the pilot crossed into the narrow space where escape and attack become the same motion. The 109 broke apart from the run and fell away. 3 German attacks had now ended in the same unbearable lesson. The closer they came, the more likely they were to die. Then the last twist came. His remaining gun jammed too. At that point, by any normal measure, the battle should have ended with Aruth bleeding in the tail, and the bomber finished sooner or later. But according to the official record, he cleared the malfunction, got the gun back into action, and when the next enemy fighter came in, he destroyed that one too. His fourth of the fight. That was the part German pilots had laughed at in the beginning. The idea that one bomber gunner could make close attack itself feel suicidal. By the end of the action, nobody coming in on that tail was laughing anymore. Because Michael Eruth had turned the rear of a wounded B-17 into something far worse than a defensive position. He had turned it into a place where overconfidence got fighters killed. The next German attack was supposed to finish the bomber. That was the logic of the sky by then. The B-17 had already been mauled. Michael Eruth had already broken up attack after attack after attack from the tail. German pilots who had first come in laughing now knew exactly what sat behind that fortress. A gunner who did not fire early, did not scare easily, and did not waste his burst. That made him more than dangerous. It made him a problem. And in air combat, once you become the problem, every enemy plane starts trying to solve you first. Then the shell hit. It did not glance off. It did not strike somewhere harmless and cinematic. It came into the tail like violence with weight, punching through metal and turning Aruth's compartment into smoke, fragments, and pain all at once. The blast shattered the fragile order of everything around him. He was hit badly. One gun was already out. His oxygen line was cut. The interphone died. What little separation existed between him and the freezing, roaring emptiness outside seemed to vanish in one brutal second. The worst part was not the pain, it was the silence after it. A bomber under attack is never truly quiet, but a man with no interphone and no oxygen enters a different kind of isolation. The rest of the crew was still somewhere ahead fighting their own crisis. Pilots wrestling a wounded aircraft, other gunners trying to keep enemy fighters off them, men in the body of the bomber making life-and-death choices in seconds. But for Aruth, none of that came through anymore. No voice, no order, no reassurance. Only the shattered tail, the broken guns, and the knowledge that the Luftwaffe would see the damage and come harder. That was the true center of the battle. Not when the fighters first arrived, not when the first one broke away under his fire. Here, because at this point, survival no longer depended on courage in the storybook sense. It depended on whether a wounded man in a ruined compartment could remain useful for 10 seconds longer than the enemy expected. Forward in the fortress, the pilots threw the aircraft into violent, evasive movement. The B-17 lurched and rolled hard enough that some of the crew believed the bomber was finished and bailed out. That was how broken the aircraft had become. The tail was damaged, the crew shaken apart, the communications gone, and the Germans still circling in for the next kill. From the Luftwaffe side, it must have looked over. A wounded bomber. Tail hit. Gunner silent. exactly the moment an experienced fighter pilot waits for. The next Messerschmitt came in with that confidence. He did not expect a dead airplane to still have teeth. A Ruth, bleeding and half suffocating, still had one working gun. One. That should not have been enough. But enough in war is measured by timing, not comfort. A single .50 caliber gun at the right range can mean more than two guns fired badly from panic. Ruth knew that. He stayed on the weapon, held his fire, and watched the German pilot commit deeper into the tail approach. That was always the heart of his so-called suicidal tactic. Not recklessness. Control so severe it looked insane from the outside. He let the fighter come too close. Close enough that the attack no longer belonged to the German pilot. Close enough that escape and aggression had become the same motion. Then Ruth fired. The burst landed late and hard. Not a warning, not a spray meant to scare. A real killing burst into a fighter that had already spent too much sky reaching the bomber. The Messerschmitt broke away under the hit, its attack shattered before it could finish the fortress. That should have bought him breathing room. It bought him almost none, because the sky around a damaged bomber is never patient. German pilots knew the tail was hurt. They also knew that if they came one after another without pause, they could eventually overwhelm even the best gunner through exhaustion, damage, or simple lack of ammunition. So another attack developed quickly, and this one carried the worst possible gift with it. His last gun jammed now. The logic of battle was absolute. Wounded gunner, no oxygen, no interphone. One gun left, then no gun. That should have been the end. For most men, it would have been. This is the part where war usually decides it has had enough of one man and collects its due. A Ruth could have pulled back, could have tried to save strength, could have crawled away from the shattered position and waited for whatever happened next to happen without him. Instead, he went after the jam. Under fire, wounded, struggling for air, inside a tail compartment that no longer resembled safety in any useful sense. That decision mattered more than any single burst he fired, because it broke the enemy's expectation completely. German pilots could understand a good gunner. They could understand a hard target. They could even understand a lucky burst from a dying bomber. But a tail gunner who stayed on the weapon after the shell hit, after the oxygen line was gone, after the interphone was dead, after the final gun jammed, that was something else. That was not ordinary resistance anymore. That was a man refusing the natural ending of the fight. He cleared the jam, got the weapon back, and when the next fighter came in believing the tail had finally gone dead, Ruth answered again. This was the cruelest kill of the action because it punished certainty. The German pilot had every reason to believe the defense was over. The bomber was mauled, the tail had been hit, and no sane gunner could still be effective in that wreckage. But Michael Ruth was still there, still waiting, still disciplined enough to hold the burst until it mattered. The final attack folded the same way the others had, confidence turning into damage in a handful of seconds. The fighter committed too far, the gun spoke too late for him to recover properly, and another German aircraft peeled away from the B-17 instead of killing it. And by then the tail of the bomber had become something worse than a defended position. It had become a warning. Every surviving German pilot in that fight now knew the same thing. Damage did not mean safety. A wounded gunner did not mean the approach was open. The rear of that fortress had turned into a psychological trap, a place where overconfidence kept getting pilots hurt or killed. That was Ruth's real victory. Not only the number, the transformation. He took the most isolated gun position on the bomber, let enemy fighters believe patience meant weakness, and then taught them, again and again, that the closer they came, the deadlier the trap became. Later records would credit Michael Ruth with one of the highest official totals ever recorded for an American bomber gunner. But numbers by themselves are only the skeleton of a story. What made this action unforgettable was how ugly and personal it became. No easy heroism, no clean duel. Just a wounded man in a ruined tail compartment, cut off from his crew, refusing to give the enemy the ending they had already started believing in. That is why the Germans had laughed at first, because from outside, the tactic looked insane. Let the fighter come closer, wait longer, fire later, trust a few killing rounds more than a long burst of panic. Every instinct screams against it. That is what made it work. And by the time the attack was over, Nobody coming in on that B-17's tail was laughing anymore, because Michael Aruth had done something bomber gunners almost never get time to do. He made the enemy afraid of the last few yards. The German pilots thought one wounded tail gunner would break. Michael Aruth made that assumption fatal. He waited until fighters came too close to escape cleanly, stayed on the guns after a shell tore through his compartment, cleared the final jam under fire, and turned a shattered tail into a kill zone. That was the suicidal tactic, not madness. Patience so cold and so disciplined that enemy pilots kept flying into it before they understood they were already dead.